Cold open question for you, Wes Goldberg. Does the NBA have a reffing problem right now?
I think they have a reffing problem in that I don't blame the officials necessarily for just trying to do their best with so many rules, and I feel like we always try to add more rules and more layers on top of things when we have problems. This challenge thing, and maybe this should be a foul instead of that, and should we be able to challenge this where we weren't able to challenge it before? Here's my idea. Just let the officials call a clean game. If something looks like a flop, just let them call it. If something looks ridiculous, let them call it a foul. Just let them interpret the game more and put less rules on them, and I feel like we might have a solution. But right now, I'm sure you're referencing the end of that Knicks game. Like, stuff like that happens when they have to think about so many. Oh, did he actually have possession or was it not possession? Like, they have to think about all these different rules. No, the dude ran into the guy's legs. That seems like it should be a foul, regardless of what the rule book says. So do less text, less rule book stuff, more just let the officials call a clean game.
I agree with everything you said, and I think on top of that, I think being a ref is just insanely hard, and I think it's also better when we let sports and we let every aspect of sports be as human as possible. I can understand Monty Williams and empathize with Monty Williams being really mad at the refs. Wes, when you're in arenas, I'm sure 5 times a game, 10 times a game, whatever, you see Eric Spoelstra or a player MFing a ref, getting in a ref's face.
Right.
Cavs-Mavs, which we're going to get to because it was just a great game, Antonio Lang, who's an assistant on Cleveland staff, was like the consigliere to the refs towards the end of the game because JB was getting so mad, and I think they're like, okay, this is a close game. We don't want him losing his gasket. Let's just like have Antonio go get the explanation of things so we can avoid some of this, like you were just watching it. I think we all, like, and also I don't want to sit through a bunch of replays just to get things right. That's not a good product.
Right.
It's not. I don't want to watch, the worst thing about the NBA to me is when you get a really good game that has momentum, it has flow, and then the last 5 minutes, it drags because you're reviewing everything, and the TV timeouts are already longer than they should be, and there's all this in-arena entertainment we don't need. You're just going to keep making this much more of a bloated thing that makes it harder to keep people's attention. That's a bigger picture issue than, hey, the refs are messing up right now, but this is a human job full of human error. I think we got to cut the refs some slack sometimes, honestly.
And just make the job easier. They know what should be a foul, but sometimes, you get James Harden going into the basket, and he does exactly what he needs to do according to the rule book and is able to grift and get a foul in that way. But everybody, including the refs, know it's like, yeah, he tricked you into that, and that's not really a basketball play, and that's why people get upset with James Harden. So instead of just having all these different rules and these different layers on top of it that make the ref's job harder because they have to interpret what's going on in the court, go into their encyclopedia of the rule book that's in their head, and try to come up with the best call in a split second, just be like, yeah, that play kind of sucked. We don't like it. I'm calling the foul on James Harden. I don't like what he just did, and just let them do that. Get rid of the challenges. Get rid of them. Put them in you can have them for the play-in tournament and for the playoffs. You can have one in the final 5 minutes of each half. That's it. Get out of here with the challenges. Get rid of them. Let the game go, and just let the refs play. If you and I at a sports bar can watch a game and be like, that should be a foul, then the refs should be able to do the same thing.
Easy. Let's just chill out, I think. And again, Monty Williams, I get it, but come on, brother. We can figure this out and it'll be okay. All right, coming up on today's show, it's NBA championship tiers time heading into the final stretch of the season. A lot of teams to get to. Let's dive in. Welcome into the Just Basketball Show, your twice weekly look at all things NBA, WNBA, draft, free agency, refs, everything basketball. I'm Chris Manning. Filling in for Brendan Clean today is Wes Goldberg. You can find him at places like Locked On Heat, Locked On NBA, The Ringer. Wes, all you can heat as well. It's good to have you. I want to tell people about our friends at Thrive Fantasy as well. Thrive Fantasy is a player prop DFS platform where you can pick more or less on your favorite players across multiple sports, including the NBA and the NFL when that's in season. Sign up today with code JustBasketball, and Thrive will match your first deposit of $250. Wes, before we get into championship tiers, I do just want to talk about Cavs-Mavs from the other night, and specifically Heat culture product Max Strus, who hit the longest game-winning shot in NBA three-point era history, shot clock era history. That game, beyond the shot that he made, which was miraculous, which caused a whole arena to lose its mind in a game it felt like the Cavs were about to lose after Luka, by the way, was incredible. That is the game why you get Max Strus, because he, A, is effortful the whole game. He is incredibly poised the whole game. And then you put him back in with 5 minutes left, and he catches fire, hits 5 threes. The Cavs win the game. Like, that's just a really good role player. It's the kind of guy the Cavs didn't have last year. And this also just felt like a playoff game down the stretch.
Max Strus just has a knack for kind of getting up for these moments. You know, obviously for the Heat, the last couple of years, he had the big Eastern Conference Finals 2 years ago where his foot was erroneously called to be on the line on a key three-pointer in the second half against the Celtics in Game 7 of the Conference Finals. But he made a bunch of shots in that game. And a bunch of plays in general in that game. And then last year, the Heat, having lost their first game of the play-in tournament against the Atlanta Hawks, win-or-go-home scenario against the Chicago Bulls in their second play-in game, it's Max Strus who steps up with 31 points, tying Jimmy Butler for a team-high 31 points in that game, making a ton of tough shots in that one. And that obviously set the stage for the Heat to be the number 8 seed instead of Chicago. They beat the Milwaukee Bucks in the first round, and then the rest is history there. So he's got a knack for making big plays in big moments. It's why the Miami Heat loved him. It's why the Cavaliers gave him $16 million a year. It's why... And it's why he's got the cojones to go and take that shot from 59 feet. It's why Evan Mobley found Max Strus. And also, you know, before that play, he hit 4 straight three-pointers in like 70 seconds to erase a 10-point deficit. And then, you know, Luka drops off a pass to PJ Washington. PJ Washington with the easy dunk, but left just enough time for Max Strus to get one rhythm dribble and then pull up from right behind the Cavs logo and swish the shot. Unbelievable moment. There's a couple of times, Chris, a year where I'm sitting and I'm watching the games on my couch, and you know, my wife might be in the other room, and I just scream out, "Oh my God!" or just some expletive, and it triggers her to just be like, "Hey, is everything okay?" from the other room, and I'm just like, "Yeah, everything's fine. Our old friend Max Strus just won the game for the Cavs."
The thing that just strikes me about him too, Wes, and I think it's just something Cleveland didn't have in terms of their playoff loss to the Knicks last year, was that he is just composed in every single moment. Like, he is even he just hit the greatest shot. I know he hit one of these and when he was playing D2 that was similar to this. I'm sorry, like, no offense to D2 basketball. I love that he had that before. It's not the same as hitting it in front of an NBA arena past the outstretched arm of Luka Doncic. Like, right. It's just not. Like, it's just not. The fact that he did that, and a lot of players can do this, but the fact that he does his post-game interview with Serena Winters, the Bally Sports sideline reporter, after the game, and it's just like, you would have thought you just were interviewing him about, like, the milk he just bought at the store, and, like, that he got a great deal on, like, some greens. Like, that guy is just not... I'm not saying he doesn't feel emotion, but he's almost, like, stoic in just how he can process everything, and that is, I think, such an important tangible to have on good teams. I think all the really good teams have guys like that ultimately, and this is I think part of why he's worth what he's worth in the league right now.
Yeah, that's why Eric Spoelstra trusted him down the stretch. I mean, I remember even talking to that guy in the locker room, and like sometimes he would make a joke, and I didn't even realize it was a joke because he is just so dry and just so even keel the whole time, and he just sort of be like, and would give you like a fake like Kawhi Leonard laugh every once in a while. And Like, I'd be like, oh, okay, all right, it's a joke. But then you got to know him and his personality, and he was really great to be around. And then, but yeah, I mean, that's just Max Strus. Like, he's just a cool guy, and you need those guys, and that stuff really matters. You know, we get so involved in the X's and O's and the stuff like that, and the statistics when we analyze the game. But sometimes you just need a dude who just nothing phases him. It doesn't matter if it's a D2 game or a game against Luka Doncic and the Cavaliers in an important game at the end in the final stretch of the season, or in the Eastern Conference Finals, and he stepped up in all of those scenarios.
The other, I think, performance from this game that is worth just shouting out is Luka Doncic, because Dallas is good. We're going to get to him later, so we're not going to dive into them too big picture here. But 41 minutes for him, 45 points, 17 to 29 from the field, 6 of 11 from 3, 5 of 5 from the line, 14 assists against just 1 turnover, 9 rebounds. This guy is, and Kyrie, by the way, 36 and 3 for him. That duo I mean, a large part of the reason West has felt like a playoff game is that's the kind of thing you have to deal with in a playoff setting, that the two guys can just overwhelm you like that, and Luka in particular. We've said this about a lot of other guys, and I think Embiid kind of comes to mind most for this, but at some point that guy's just going to have a playoff run like this where it feels like he's scoring 40 a night for like 3 straight rounds. Maybe it's this year. I mean, that guy is unguardable, honestly. Like Cleveland doesn't have like a Kawhi or anything like that, but like Strus defended him, Okoro defended him. Didn't matter. He's just not fazed by anything in the way he's playing right now.
I don't know how you watch Luka Doncic and you're just like not impressed every single time. His understanding of angles, and the other thing that I've been noticing over the last couple of weeks as the Mavs make this run is like I think we do understand like he's just got great body control and he knows angles and he just plays at his own pace. But his touch when he gets within 7 feet of the basket is unstoppable. He shoots like 7 foot like hooked floaters like they're layups, and he makes them at that rate. His touch is maybe the best I've ever seen in that like 4 to 8 foot range. It feels like it's going in every single time, and that's why I think it feels so unguardable, is because you could stop him from getting at the basket. You could keep him from getting a foot from the basket, but you can't really stop him from getting 4 to 7 feet away from the basket. He's always going to wiggle his way into those areas, and once he does, it's game over, right? And so that's why I feel it feels so just unstoppable is a great word.
Yeah, he's unreal. All right, let's get in championship tiers. Wes, let's start at the elite level because I want to play a little game here and just think about, okay, can we poke holes in any of these teams, make cases against any of these teams the rest of the way? Here's the 3 teams I have as the real, legit, locked-in contenders. The Boston Celtics, the Denver Nuggets, and the LA Clippers. I'll ask you this. Is there any team that you feel like I should be putting in that tier, in the upper echelon tier, that I don't have in there?
No, I think that's
should one of them be out?
Yeah, I would maybe put Denver and Boston in the tier by themselves, and then I would maybe do one other like 1B tier of the Clippers and the Bucks. And maybe that's just being like reluctant to go all the way in and trust the LA Clippers and Kawhi Leonard and James Harden and Paul George and that whole group, because what they've done on the court this year has been undeniably like the looks of a contender. They've been dominant basically a couple weeks after they made the James Harden deal in the first place. So I won't quibble with it too much, but if I had to make an adjustment, that would have been it.
They're the easiest one, I think, West, to say, okay, should they be here just because they don't have the track record? And to me, if I'm saying, okay, what do I make a case against them with? It's their health. That's a really boring thing. But Paul George is hurt again. Brendan, if he listens to this, he's going to text me and be like, Chris, you can't just talk about health. The Clippers, you kind of can. Mm-hmm. Paul George is hurt. No. Kawhi has the history. Yep. Harden can break down at times. We've seen it. Like that's a huge if you were gambling, if you had to take $100, and who's your gambling partner here with the shout out BetMGM. BetMGM. All right. So if you were taking $100 and you had to place it on a BetMGM account and say, all right, who am I going to bet to make it out of the Western Conference? You could go with the Clippers, but your number one hesitation would be the health. And so I think in that regard, you're right. It's like, okay, that's the team where you have a real drawback. Obviously, like Jamal Murray could get hurt for Denver, and then that sinks their hopes. Like anybody can get hurt. But they're the one team where, like, if you were to make a bet right now, that would be the hang-up, right? And so I'm okay talking about health with the Clippers. I have some other issues with the Clippers. They're not like big ones, just like small ones. I don't know if we want to get into that now, but I have no problem with Denver and Boston being a team because I just trust them more. So give me a big Clippers one. What's a big case against them to you?
They don't run, and they don't want to. And I feel like in the wrong matchup, that could really cost them. They are second to last. Let me see. I had this pulled up. They are second to last in the league this year in miles ran per game. You know how NBA.com like tracks that stuff?
Yes.
So yes. They're 29th out of 30 in distance traveled and in average speed per their second spectrum data that you can find on NBA.com. They're 29th. They're near bottom of the league in pace. They're bottom 8 in the league in pace. And because of that, they rank 29th out of 30 teams in transition defense. And you could tell me, all right, well, Ty Lue will get his team into gear in the playoffs and they'll clean up some of that transition defense stuff. But this is Kawhi, Paul George, James Harden, Zubac. Like, these guys don't want to run. Like, that's why they went and got Russell Westbrook, is because he's at least willing to run up and down the court. And so that's my biggest hang up with them, is in the wrong matchup. I just don't know that they're going to have it in them to keep up with a team like Oklahoma City, for instance, or even Denver, who they may not be the fastest pace team, but they run around a lot and they keep you moving, and that might just wear on a team that does have some of those health concerns. And again, people could say well, no, that's just the regular season basketball, and they'll ramp it up in the playoffs. All right, I looked last couple of years in the playoffs, they get slower than where they were in the regular season, not faster. They get slower. And so, I don't know, that would be my main concern. In the wrong matchup in a loaded Western Conference, they might just fold and not want to run with some of these teams.
Yeah, I think that's very possible. I think the counter I would say to that is just, if there's any team aside from Denver that I think could just manufacture a ton of points in the half court and it'd be fine, it might be Kawhi, the way he's played this year, plus Harden, plus Ty Lue, plus Paul. I think they could do it, but it is tricky to look at the other teams in this tier and what case you can make against them. I don't really have one for Boston, Wes. I don't really have, aside from just 3-point variance, again, hitting them, or again, someone just gets hurt. I don't have something in that team that really freaks me out right now. They're playing at an absurd level.
Yeah, the 3-point variance is the thing, but I also think it's a real thing, and I think it's a real thing because of the way the Celtics play. I mean, you could talk about it's a make or miss league for any team, but their whole deal is, we're going to outscore you from the 3-point line. That the whole reason that Joe Mazzulla developed this 5-out system and traded the guys like Marcus Smart and Robert Williams and Grant Williams for guys like Kristaps Porzingis and Drew Holiday is because they wanted to run this 5-out scheme. And you watch them, and when those threes aren't falling, they can short circuit sometimes. I think Jaylen Brown is most important to this team, and Kristaps Porzingis, because they're at least threats to get to the basket. Brown is like a battering ram. He's just going to plow his way to the basket. Porzingis, with the pick and roll stuff and the rim pressure that he provides and what he could do in the post. Obviously, those things are important, but I don't know that those guys could carry you in a 7-game series doing those things. And if the Celtics do go cold from 3-point range, it kind of short circuits everything, and I wonder whether or not a team can come in, get hot when they go cold. That would be the thing. So it does sort of come down to variance, but there are layers to the Celtics that I kind of want to see more. They're near the bottom of the league in free throw attempt rate. They're near the bottom of the league in drives. They rely a lot on isolation and stuff, and it works. It's worked really well. They are by far the best team in the NBA, but if we're looking to poke holes, that's where I'd be looking. Half of Boston's losses this year have come in games where they've made fewer than 15 3-pointers. And so I think they went here. I have it here. There was 9 games last year where they made, in the playoffs, where they made fewer than 15 3-pointers. So it can happen. If they don't hit a certain water level in terms of made threes, it at least opens the door for an upset.
I think there's just always going to, until it happens, I think some concern. And I think also with Tatum, I'm waiting for a series where he just, it's old school and it's not always how he plays, but mid-range and free throws and kind of battering ram Jason Tatum is a Jason Tatum I would like to see, particularly in a playoff setting. That there's a path for that in the East as well, I think, with some of the matchups they could have. You're telling me he couldn't manufacture 12, 13, 14 free throw games against Malik Beasley or Chris Middleton, who's not at 100%, or Jay Crowder? Maybe the Knicks would be the tricky one, but we talked about that the other day. That's also a matchup I think they might just be okay in.
I loved what I saw from Tatum the other night against Philly. I know there was no Joel Embiid, obviously, in that game, but him just in that fourth quarter when Philly kind of got it back to, I think, a 2-point game, and he was like, you know what, forget it. I'm just going to blow by whatever defender is in front of me, and he finished with a bunch of drives and dunks and stuff like that. He needs to do that. Like I said, Porzingis, Jaylen Brown, they're going to have a certain amount of that, but if he's doing that, I think it changes their team completely. And I guess the other hole would be he's not as good as Giannis. He might not be as good as Embiid, depending on what Embiid looks like when he comes back. There are other players in the Eastern Conference who might just be better than Jason Tatum, and I think Jason Tatum's been awesome all year, but you don't really see championship teams with their best player like Jason Tatum. They're usually just a notch better. They're usually in that like top 5 or 6 tier, and Tatum's probably just a half a notch below that. But the rest of the Celtics are just so good that it might not matter.
Other team in this tier is the Nuggets. Not a ton for me to say about them. I still think their starting 5 might be the best single 5-man lineup I trust more than any lineup in the league. I think the only question is just any concern about depth, any concern considering the youth. There's going to be a point in the playoffs where we would have seen Bruce Brown close last year, and he was so good for them in the title run. Is there just a moment where that shows itself, where Peyton Watson isn't good enough, or Christian Braun isn't good enough, or Julian Strawweather's randomly in a game, I don't know, and like it just doesn't work. Like that's like the only thing I could see really causing a fritz with Denver, Wes.
Yeah, I'm not. I hear you, because the whole point of this topic is to try to poke holes, but I'm not worried about the Nuggets' depth. The way that Michael Malone plays his lineups in the regular season is so different than what he does in the postseason. Like, in the regular season, he'll run out his starting 5, the one that you said, they get a bunch of reps together, and then he'll just take them off, and then he'll just go second unit all the way. And I think that's why you see their net rating not be as strong as a team like Boston's, for instance, where Boston will stagger their 4 stars, 5 stars, whatever you want to call it. They'll stagger their guys with bench units and mix their lineups that way. But Denver is not going to do that until the playoffs. And then you start seeing those mixed lineups. And yeah, when Jokic is off the court, this team doesn't play well. But I don't see them going with their backup centers that have been kind of hit or miss this year. We've seen them experiment a little bit with Aaron Gordon at center. It sounds like all the reporting out of Denver is the expectation is that in the playoffs, when Jokic is off the court, they're going to go Aaron Gordon at center in crunch time. And they should. And those lineups have been waxing opponents. It's fewer than 300 possessions on the season, according to Cleaning the Glass. But lineups with Aaron Gordon at center, no Nikola Jokic on the court, are outscoring opponents by 13.5 points every 100 possessions. And the 2 top ones that they have, whether it's with Peyton Watson or Christian Braun in those lineups, are outscoring them by more than 20 points per 100 possessions. So those units have been awesome. So as long as those guys are healthy, the one problem with Denver is, not to keep going back to the health conversation, but if they lose like one guy, that could unravel some of the things that they got going on. But beyond that, I really don't have any concerns about Denver. I don't.
Yeah, I still think I might just pick them to win it all again when we get to playoff prediction.
That's who I had preseason. I had the Nuggets winning it again.
Yeah, same. Jokic is, I think, just unfathomable. That team is just so in sync. I mean, it's from earlier in the year, West, but I remember just seeing a video of someone diagramming how they were playing team defense against the Lakers, and I was like, this team just knows how to play team basketball, and there's nothing quite like it in the NBA when they're all in sync like that, all kind of working in concert together. There's nothing like Jokic as a maestro kind of conducting everything on a team. All right, tier 2. Just on the outside looking into the top tier, you would have the Clippers here. I think that's more than reasonable. I have 2 teams in this tier. We're not really going to talk about anyone specific here, but it's the the Thunder and the Bucks. Is there anyone that I should be bumping up that isn't here, that isn't kind of just right on the outside looking in, but on the verge to some degree?
No, I think that's fine.
All right. The Bucks are maybe the Bucks are figuring out, and they're going to put themselves in tier 1, but if you had to bet on one of those 2 teams, Wes, actually being like let's just say a 3rd or 4th team in tier 1, would you bet on the Bucks or the Thunder?
I'd bet on the Bucks. The Bucks have a clear level to get to, right? They could clearly be better than what they are now. The Thunder, I think, are as good as they can be, and that might be good enough, by the way. But until we see that they're young, and until we see them in the playoffs, we're always going to just have that question until we see it. And with Milwaukee, we've seen Giannis win the championship. We've seen Chris Middleton win a championship. We know what Dame can do in the playoffs. We're just sort of waiting. Like, the Thunder have clicked. They're together. They play like a college basketball team that's been together for 4 years. The Bucks are the opposite of that. They're just they play like a one-and-done Duke team. And you're just like, I don't know, do we even know each other? Do we even stay in the same dorms? Like, that's the way that they play. But if they have the talent that if they click, there's obviously another level for them to get to.
Yeah, I agree with that. Just Giannis, maybe the MVP if you wanted to make that argument. Like, they're playing at a level that's just it's unfathomably good. All right, tier 3. This is the tier that I have the most teams that I'm interested in, I think, and that's what I've called it's possible, right, with a question mark. Like, you could talk yourself into it. You could believe that it's maybe there. And there's a team we're going to get into specifically here. That's the Dallas Mavericks. Here's the teams in that tier, though. The Minnesota Timberwolves, the Dallas Mavericks, the New York Knicks, the Cleveland Cavaliers, and I put the Phoenix Suns here. That Brendan had them a tier higher the last time out, but I think considering where they are in the standings and all of that, and the Bradley Beal hamstring thing, keeping him in and out of the lineup, relying on Bol for minutes, like I have this team in the it's possible, but I'm a little skeptical tier. Dallas. Wes, I know they just lost to Cleveland. I know what the standings say. I know that being in the West means their life is really hard. The fact that they are 8th and might have to be in the play-in tournament means there's a very hard path, and they could end up having to beat the Thunder and then the Nuggets or the Thunder and then it's a whole rung of teams that they're going to have to go through to actually make a finals run. But I think the formula is there. Kyrie is playing insanely well. Luka is just flat out unguardable, as we talked about. All of the role guys post-trade deadline with P.J. Washington coming in for Grant, Daniel Gafford, and Derek Lively II, who is not the most expansive player, but is good. They have really good center minutes now. Kleba's still around. I think this team has a lot of the elements that I would look for in a team that could make a run. The path is just really hard, but I believe in the upside of this team based on the star talent and based on how I think all the pieces fit together.
Yeah, it starts with Luka and Kyrie at the top, and Kyrie has been awesome for Dallas. He's been more than happy to let Luka be the best player on the team, which has sort of been an underrated thing about Kyrie throughout his career when he's been available. He's been very just, okay, LeBron, you're the best player on the team. Okay, KD, you're the best player on the team. I'm fine with all of that. And he'll just sort of play his role. And he's mastered that role next to Luka, and they've found guys, whether it's Derek Jones Jr. or Derek Lively and all these, and they obviously add P.J. Washington and Daniel Gafford and all those things. But I think my one hang-up with Dallas is as good as they've been offensively and defensively, they've been top 5 in the league over this stretch. They've won 8 of the last 9 games or whatever it is after losing that game. So that's all there. But you go before that, before this recent win streak, and they were 23rd in defensive rating from October to the end of January. That's a bigger sample than this 8-game win streak, and they've been helped by some unlucky opponent 3-point shooting percentages during that streak too. So I don't know how real the defense is. I think it's better than 23rd. I don't think it's as good as top 5. You watch Dallas play, and their communication is on point. They're doing a great job. They get deflections, and those deflections turn into transition opportunities. Luka's been really good about picking up steals and deflections, and then and not sort of messing around and just going down the floor and taking the easy points instead of doing Luka things. And so I think they're figuring out how their defense can power their offense. Their offense is going to be elite in the playoffs. We've seen Kyrie, we've seen Luka in the playoffs. Like, those guys, their games are made for that stuff. I just wonder how good their defense is when the stress test of a Denver Nuggets or an Oklahoma City Thunder come around, and all of a sudden they're able to pick on guys like Luka and Kyrie a little bit more when the opponent that they're playing has multiple guys who can handle the ball and are threats to score. Those are the teams, and those are the teams that are going to be playing in the playoffs. Those are the teams that I think can give Dallas some problems.
This is the one team I would say that this is going to be, I think, offensive to that fan base, and it's a team I'm kind of rooting for to figure it out because they've had a tough sledding of it, and it's a smaller market and all that stuff. The team that I would, of the top teams in the West, that I would think if I'm them, I kind of want to find a way to get on the right side of the bracket of is the Wolves. So, like, if the Wolves finishes the 1 seed, try to be the 8 seed if you can. And, like, you can't really play games ultimately, but, like, in the play-in, just win and figure it out. But right. I would rather play the Wolves than the Thunder. Yes, you'd have to defend Anthony Edwards. Yes, I understand how good that defense is. But I kind of would just trust Luka and Kyrie to dissect it and to get Rudy Gobert in switches and do all of that. And then it's really Ant that I'm concerned about. Mike Conley's been awesome for them. There's a reason they extended him. The Monty Morris edition makes sense, all of that. I think there's a reality where, like, that's probably the most optimal one. And then from there, it's like, okay, like, you kind of got to just beat teams that you got to try to beat again. I also, Wes, I want to just see Luka get a run at this point of his career, just to see what he can kind of do, because I don't so much care about, like, is he the next guy that's going to get unhappy or anything like that, but we don't really get, considering how deep the talent is in the league now, we don't get, like, singular star teams that really work, right? Like, we don't get teams, like, there's no '07 Cavs that can exist in the league anymore, where, like, one guy and a schleppy supporting cast can make a run. That doesn't happen. This isn't that. All the guys they have are solid, but it's the closest thing we have to that kind of team structure where it's so dependent on one guy and then everything kind of going in his orbit. Even the Nuggets, I would say, are a little different just because Jokic amplifies in a way that I think Luka doesn't exactly do one-to-one. I want to see just what that kind of team, how they would match up against teams that are built differently and in a really talented league like this.
Yeah, I'm with you. And to your point about, like, they probably would try to get Minnesota, because I agree with you on that matchup. But on the flip side, like, the Thunder might be the worst matchup for them in the first round, and both of those teams are tied in record at 1-2. And Dallas, like you said, they're right now number 8 in the mix for that play-in tournament where you can't really manipulate the standings. So the Mavericks are going to be, like, they have no shot, obviously, at getting to the top of the standings, but they're going to be, like, standings watching the top of the Western Conference as much as anybody else because of those matchups.
The funny part is I think there's a world, West, where if, like, the Nuggets are the 3 seed, I think teams might prefer to be in the play-in than be, like, the 6 seed.
Yeah. It's crazy. I understand what you're saying. I bet you that's not true. You would rather just not be in the play-in tournament.
Yeah,
but,
you'd rather just, like,
understand
say,
the point you're
okay,
making.
yeah. It's like you think the Wolves are a better matchup for you than the Nuggets. Like, I would probably agree. I would agree with that. I would also probably rather play the Wolves than Kawhi. You know, like that's unfortunate.
For Dallas, like I was going to say, either the Clippers, the Nuggets, and the Thunder are the teams that you don't want to see if you're Dallas. But who knows, man? I have no idea. I also know that none of those teams want to see Luka on the other side of them either. So it goes both ways.
Do we need Clippers Dallas again? I'm kind of like wondering if that's maybe just
bit.
like what we did. Okay, yeah, I think we kind of do. All right, is there anyone else in this tier, Wes? Wolves, Cavs, Knicks that should be higher or lower? Should we bump the Suns down even further? Like, what should we do here?
I understand why we have Phoenix, and you named the tier. It's possible, right? I would probably have personally Phoenix a tier below Minnesota because I believe in them a little bit more. But I'm fine with this. The one team I think that you didn't include in here that I would include in here is the Miami Heat. I know we did a little bit of a deep dive on them earlier in the week, but they're the defending Eastern champs. I know that their record isn't where it is with these other teams, or their point differential isn't where it is with these other teams, but I don't think that matters as much for Miami. And if we're talking about it's possible, like I think based on the Heat's history, we have to always consider the possibility of Miami making a deep run.
I have a tier for them coming up, so that's a good shout. I have a similar tier. They're in with one other team that I'll explain when we get there. Let's go to our next one, though. Tier 3.5, a team kind of stuck between two tiers. And that's one team, and it's called I'm Talking Myself Into This. That's the Golden State Warriors. There's a lot going on in Warrior Land.
Yeah. The
Steve Kerr extension, Klay Thompson, some very just real comments about his future and his thoughts about, frankly, his basketball mortality. Chris Paul comes back, and I thought looked good and was very helpful to them in his first game back. Curry is still Curry, maybe not Apex Curry. I want to start with the Kerr thing, though, and kind of build this out a little bit, because him signing a 2-year extension, to me, more than we already thought this was the last dance, the Kerr extension tells us how much time we have left here. Mm-hmm. That's what that tells us. And I think every year, this year, next year, the year after that, the next 2.5 years are going to be so urgent for Steph Curry in this era of Warriors basketball. That's what that extension told me.
Yeah, and it aligns with Steph's contract. His contract is up when Steve Kerr's contract is up now, and that's on purpose, right? That's not an accident. So, yeah, we got 2 more years of whatever this is for the Warriors, and who knows what it looks like. Klay Thompson's going to be a free agent. There's decisions to make about Draymond, Chris Paul, all these guys, but I'm curious. Why do you think you're talking yourself into the Warriors here? I know they've been winning some games lately, but what about this team makes you feel like it's anything more than, okay, they're figuring some stuff out versus can this team actually make a deep run in the West?
Number one, I think it's a respect for the talent in the organization. I think it has to start there. I understand it's not the same team that won the finals a couple of years ago. Clay hasn't even had, I think, levels that we saw from him that season, that playoff run. I do just believe in the coaching staff. I do believe in Curry. I do believe in, I think, the way they've won some games at times. Now, the Nuggets, the way they lost to Denver after coming out really hot and then just kind of never having answers or this way did kind of poo-poo some of that to me just a little bit in terms of, okay, how much do I really believe, kind of how much they compete with the best teams. Right. But it's those things, and then I think the Kuminga surgence, the Pods arrival, I think they're getting good minutes out of all these role guys, and I think those guys are a little bit ahead of where I thought they might have been. There's a version of this team that I think could exist, and I think it is admittedly very speculative that I could see them just being on a really, really good run here and making the most out of this just because they have the track record. The veterans know how to do it. Kerr knows how to do it. They understand the urgency, and they're getting Kuminga and Bujinski and all of this kind of clicking in a way that I think they're going to be dangerous. The biggest argument against it in some ways, aside from the track record too this year and where we've gotten them, is just they're another team that is, based on how they've been to date, it's going to be they're going to have to, they might have to win 2 games in the play-in tournament just to make the playoffs.
Yeah.
I'm not saying they can't do that and then go on a run, but the path is just, that's just a really hard path to walk if you're any team, frankly.
I'll start by saying that I love what I've seen from Golden State lately. It does figure out that they're figuring something out. They have an identity, which I think is important. Playing Draymond at the 5, they're going small ball. It allows Kuminga to be a little bit more of a battering ram, frees up Andrew Wiggins to do some things. The Draymond Green, Steph Curry 2-man game, and that chemistry is still the class of the league in terms of 2-man game chemistry. And it's great. It's great that they're figuring some stuff out. I don't buy this team at all as a legit contender in the Western Conference. Not even a little bit. I think what they're figuring out now is something that can create a path going into the offseason that provides some clarity in the direction that they want to go. But in terms of being a legit contender in the West, you already laid out the difficulty of the path that they would have to get to just based on the fact that they were so bad and just such a mess for most of the season. But even during this recent winning stretch, I mean, it's been cupcakes as a schedule here, man. It's Brooklyn, Philly without Embiid, the Pacers, who have been on a little bit of a slide, Phoenix, that was a good win, Utah, okay, they lost to the Clippers, they beat Utah again, congrats, they post-trade deadline Jazz, the Lakers at home without LeBron, Charlotte, you lose against the Denver Nuggets in a game that I thought was a little bit more of a blowout than the final score.
Yeah, I agree.
Showed. And then you beat the Washington Wizards, the least serious team in the NBA. I'm not buying it there. They have against teams with a top 10 point differential. This is a stat from Cleaning the Glass. Here are the bottom 3 teams in the league in terms of here are the teams with the most losses against teams with top 10 point differentials. I'll word it that way. Washington, obviously 0-21 against the top 10 teams in the league. Detroit has 19 losses against the top 10 teams in the league. And then it's Golden State, tied with Detroit, 19 losses against the top 10 teams in the league. They're just not up to that par. And if they even were to make a deep run in the Western Conference, as great as Jonathan Kuminga has been, and right now Klay Thompson is our number 2 scorer, but I think it'll be Kuminga by the end of the year. But either way, they will have easily the worst number 2 scorer of any team to ever make a deep run in the playoffs. I believe that. If they were somehow to make that deep of a run. They're so behind what Steph Curry needs in terms of a co-star at this point. I know it's different because you could argue that Draymond is the co-star, but he does all these other things at a high level that's not necessarily scoring. But at the end of the day, you got to put points on the board, and I don't really trust this team to do that against some of the top teams in the West. So I prefaced it with positivity. I want to end it with positivity. I love that the Warriors have sort of figured out a direction here. And I think that and I love that they've got a 2-year window now, and I think that there's something they can do in that 2-year window. But for this season, that window is shut.
I think, too, Curry, as great as he is, this isn't Apex Curry anymore, and I think that means there's less of a margin for error. They don't have as much room to play around and overcome mistakes because Curry isn't, he's still very, very good, but he's just a hair below where he was even 2 years ago, I think. And then Clay is just in a different phase now. And like that, you don't have that flame. Like you can get spurts of him. He's had a couple of these games coming off the bench where he comes in and lights it up. But I think you're seeing someone like really grappling with what injuries have done to him. And two, maybe Wes, I'm just being sentimental because I saw these Clay comments the other day, and he's talking to Sam Amick from The Athletic, and got asked about, does this change your future, your thoughts about your future? And he says, not really. Quote, not really. I mean, you still got to examine all your options, but I would love to be a Warrior for life. Whatever happens, though, I've got a few more years to play this game, so I'm going to enjoy every second. I realize that I see the light at the end of the tunnel, and I'm not sure if I want to play till I'm 40, man. That sounds really exhausting. There is something to me that this team doesn't have, because of the Kerr extension and Curry's contract and everything. We kind of know that this isn't all or nothing right now. This isn't the Warriors version of The Last Dance. But they are pushing up against like the dying light of the sun to some degree, and I wonder if that just spurs something in them, just because we know what that like that. There's nothing to. I will readily admit, there is nothing in front of you can look on Basketball Reference, on Cleaning the Glass, that tells you like there's something here. There's just something about this group on a human level that I'm like, I just wonder if there's like a level here they're able to hit just because they understand what it takes and they kind of know there's not really much time left to do this. I'm
with you. I'm totally with you. Like I covered that team for a few years. Like that there is a real human bond with that group and in that organization, and a belief that they have that they probably shouldn't have based on all the things that you were talking about. Like on paper, this team should have zero belief, but they've got Steph Curry. He's one of the greatest players of all time, one of the great winners of all time. And as long as he's there and Steve Kerr are there, you know, they're going to believe that they can win a series. But, dude, like, I just don't see it. Like, I don't mean to dismiss that human element because there's real chemistry between Steph and Draymond and Clay. And I think championship DNA, as much of a cliche as it is a real thing. When you know what it takes to win, sometimes you could just get to that level. But, like, statistically, if you just replaced Draymond with Herb Jones and Klay Thompson with Tim Hardaway Jr., it's basically the same team on paper, right? Like that's essentially what the level that those guys have been playing at. You kind of get blinded by the names and the history and everything that shows up on a Wikipedia page about this team. But like, okay, if Steph's co-stars were Jonathan Kuminga, Tim Hardaway Jr., and Herb Jones, like, would you give this team a shot? Of course not. You know, no way. And that's kind of why. And then you look at, okay, well, what would that team be in the standings? They'd probably be around 10th in the Western Conference. What is this team right now? They're 10th in the Western Conference. And so, you know, again, I don't mean to dismiss some of the DNA stuff, but you know, that's just sort of where they're at. You you almost have to get past the names a little bit, even when you want to give it credit.
100%. I think I'm in my sentimental sad boy era, and that's where we're riding with this.
Let's do it.
Would like to just see.
What's the matchup you would like to see if Golden State were to get out of the play-in tournament? Because we all want to see Warriors Lakers in the play-in. That's obvious. But like in a playoffs, in a 7-game series,
the Warriors. I want Warriors Thunder because it's old versus young. It is Draymond guarding Chet. It is the old heads versus the upstarts who haven't done this at all before versus the guys that have been there and done that. It is Curry against a team that he hit one of his most iconic shots ever against in a different era of that team now that has evolved past that version. I frankly also just like for the Thunder, that might be good for them too. Even whether they win or lose, that might be good for them to go through that. I mean, like Chet, your body's going to feel like crap after that series, but maybe going against Draymond in the post for like 2 weeks might teach you some stuff about how to play playoff basketball.
Shea would eat that team alive, and
eat that
defense alive. There's a tendency of perimeter players to kind of get into a Warriors style game when they play the Warriors. I think about like De'Aaron Fox and John Morant the last couple of years, guys who just should be getting at the basket nonstop, but you play against the Warriors and you're like, oh, it's 3-point heaven. Let's just let it go from 3-point range where they should not. Shea's not going to do that. Shea's like, I don't even want to take these threes. I'm going to get to the basket over and over and over again. I'm not going to play into Golden State's game. I'm going to play my game. But in terms of the storyline part two, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, as a rookie for the Clippers, pushed that Kevin Durant Warriors team in the first round. They got a win in LA. during that first round series, and that was sort of his like, hey, I'm here and I can handle this. He was great for them in that series, and so it would be kind of cool for him to also face this team. And then if you're the Thunder, hey, we knocked off the Steph Curry Warriors in the first round. That would give them self-belief and be like, oh, we could do anything maybe. And might be the worst possible scenario for the rest of the Western Conference if that were the case. So yeah, I love that. I love that as a story.
Yeah, that's kind of now. That's all I want now. Frankly, I just want that. All right, tier 4.
All right.
Not sure they are good, but they still scare me. I have 2 teams in here. It's the Miami Heat, who I have in my notes, Wes. You can attest I sent them to you. I put in my notes, should they be a tier up? So I even thought about this. And then the Lakers, who are in there just because I have an enormous amount of respect for LeBron James, even if I'm not sure that Lakers team is very good. That's my tier 4.
That's fine. Like I said, I think the Heat should be up in that Knicks, Cavs, Suns, Timberwolves, Mavericks tier, but I believe in them more and more. They just got 2 big wins in Sacramento and in Portland. On the second night of a back-to-back. They're playing the Denver Nuggets Thursday night, which is a game I think everybody's extremely interested in watching. And the way that Jimmy Butler is playing, it's the best two-way basketball he's played all season long. He's averaging more than 24 points a game. Shooting is at 56%. Jimmy Butler might quietly back his way into a 50-40-90 season because he's like shooting 40% from 3 this year, but only because he shoots threes when he's holding pocket aces. In other words, like when he is wide open and in rhythm and he knows he's going to make it. I don't know that he's even going to get to 100 3-point attempts by the end of the year, but he is on pace. And that would kind of qualify him for a 50-40-90 season, which is insane. He also needs to get a little bit better from free throws. But, yeah, like they're the Miami Heat, man. Like, if they're playing well, I don't care what their record is. If they're playing like this and they're playing well and they're clicking going into the playoffs, it doesn't matter what seed they are. They're the team that I don't really care about home court advantage for them. They've been one of the best teams on the road all season long. In fact, they've been a little bit better on the road than they are at home. They won a road game in each series to start every series in their run last year, and they're capable of doing it again. And then that way you just steal home court advantage in the playoffs instead of earning it over the course of an 82-game season. I'm not counting them out. I think they're legit in the East.
Yeah, the West is the bigger bloodbath just because it's a little deeper. But I mean, this is right now as we're recording. Here's the East standings right now. Celtics are the 1 seed. They're going to be the 1 seed. They're 7.5 games up on Cleveland. Cleveland's the 2 seed. The Bucks are the 3 seed. The Knicks have fallen to 4. Very quietly, Wes, the Heat are only a game and a half back of the Knicks. Then you get to Philly, who is also only a game and a half back of the Knicks. Closer to the Knicks are closer to 5-6 than they are 2 at this point. And then you get into Orlando and Indiana and Chicago and the Hawks and a bunch of blah. 1 through 6 to 7, maybe even 8 if Indiana can put a scare into someone in round 1 if it's not Boston, just based on the numbers they can put up, and I think that the defensive improvements they've made since the deadline. I do think the East is also going to be fun. Is there a Heat matchup you would want to see? Like that if you could get it in round 1, you'd be like, sign me up for that, just for rooting for just interest of watching it, or the Heat saying, hey, I think we could beat that team.
Yeah, I've been thinking about this over the last couple games. Well,
the beatable one is Cleveland. I think is probably the answer. Unfortunately for me,
probably I would want to see maybe Milwaukee earlier than later. If you had to see the Bucks, I'd rather see them earlier than later. And then just from, I get you're not going to play Boston because hopefully the Heat won't be in the play-in tournament and that won't be an option. But yeah, I would say either Cleveland or Milwaukee. I don't really want to see the Knicks in the first round. I don't want to see them.
Heat Bucks in round 1, frankly, we should get just for the sake of like last year plus the Damian Lillard part of I just kind of want that for that. Like on top of the basketball potentially being really interesting and pretty grimy, there's just a lot of demons to be exercised, I think, in that series.
It would be a nightmare scenario for Milwaukee to see Miami. If you asked the Bucks, what's the one team you don't want to see in the first round? It's the Heat. They would rather see the Celtics in the first round than the Heat, just because it's like if we lose to the Celtics in the first round, it's not like set the alarms, burn the house down. Like if you lose to the Heat in the first round again after you made all of these changes, you fired 2 different coaches. You traded your core player in Drew Holiday for Damian Lillard. You made all of these wholesale changes to your roster because you lost to this team in the first round. If you did it again, or if you were even pushed to 7 games and you looked wobbly, it would be cause for alarm, I think, in Milwaukee.
Yeah, do you think they'd let Giannis guard Jimmy Butler this time around, or what?
I think they will. Under Doc Rivers, they've been a little bit more versatile defensively. The guys are buying in. I really like what I've seen from the Milwaukee Bucks over the last couple of weeks. I know that they haven't been winning a ton of games, but I think the process has been there. It's been good. If they can get Chris Middleton healthy, I think they're a legit team to threaten Boston in the Eastern Conference. But this was the show we did earlier this week. Like, when you talk about the East, it's all about, like, okay, Boston's the team to beat. We all know that. Which team has the best chance to knock them off? And when you phrase it like that, I still go to Milwaukee, and I still go to Miami, and I still go to New York. And those are sort of the teams. And I like Milwaukee and Miami a little bit more. I started talking myself into the Knicks for a bit. I know they've been dealing with injuries, and maybe it's a little bit of recency bias because they've been losing games, because they've been hurt. I want to see that team at full strength. But if we're talking about teams that can knock Boston off, I like Milwaukee and I like Miami more than any other team in the East.
I agree. Lakers, just LeBron. That's it. There's not a lot of other confidence with that team.
And they did it last year with basically the same team and the same coach. I know the West is harder, but you can't pick them. But like, I guess you can't rule them out either.
The fact that we could also get Durant, LeBron, and Curry in the play-in tournament is just like unbelievable. West is really good. West is really, really good. All right, Tier 5, not quite in the middle, but not exactly a contender. Pacers, Kings, Pelicans. I feel like I should put the Pelicans higher, frankly. This feels a little bit disrespectful to them based on their record. But they're there. They're playing really well right now. They're 5th in the West right now. Certainly not, I don't think, in a running to push for 4. They're 3.5 back of the Clippers and 4.5 back of Denver. But they're ahead of the pack right now as far as staying above the 7, 8, 9, 10 fray. That is at least something for them, I think, to bank on and rest their laurels on. Anything stand out to you between Indiana, New Orleans, and Sacramento, Wes?
Not really. I think Indiana had their best moment of the season in the play-in, the in-season tournament. I think
them and the Lakers, honestly, like they both kind of peaked like 4 months ago.
Sacramento,
however long ago it was.
It feels like a little bit of a come-down year after their year last year, where they kind of settle in and figure out who they really are. And I think they make some. They'll be aggressive in making improvements over the offseason, but they're not going to make a long run in the playoffs. The Pelicans are they're the one that stand out because they're so confusing. Because they'll win like 4 games in a row and get like a statement win, and then they'll just like drop like 3 of 6, 3 of 5, and you're just like, what is going on here? And oftentimes it's just like what Zion Williamson is doing, and whether he's healthy, and if he's engaged defensively, and if he's just doing Zion Williams things on offense. But I have absolutely zero belief in the New Orleans Pelicans, and yet they're still one of the top 5 teams or the top 6 teams in the Western Conference. I just keep waiting for them to fall into the play-in tournament and swap places with one of these teams that people actually talk about, and it just isn't happening yet.
Yeah, and then like Zion's getting. I mean, Zion's had some really interesting moments as of late. Where Point Zion is, I think, a very, very hard guy to defend, and that in a playoff setting, I think, could be a real differentiator for them if they get the right matchup. The last couple weeks, I mean, this isn't everything, but they're plus 6.1 per 100 possessions. They're still like top 10, borderline top 10 offense, borderline top 10 defense. The defense, I mean, it's actually better than it has been on the year, but 11th in the league over the last couple weeks with some teams playing kind of absurdly good defense over the last few weeks. They're just like a team. They're not obviously on the same tier to me as the Thunder, West, because they just haven't had the same success, and I don't think they have anyone as good as Shea. But they are kind of in the same class to me, of where I kind of just need to see it before I need them to like win a round before I'm like, okay, now I take this like fully seriously. And that's kind of unfair to them to some degree, but I think that's the reality of it.
It's totally unfair to them, and I take them, and I'm with you. I give them zero consideration when I'm talking about teams in the West that are contenders. They're right there with all these other teams, and I give them absolutely zero consideration, and that probably is unfair to them.
All right, we're going to go to Tier 6 now. Bunch of blah, which is a little bit unfair to some teams that I kind of like sometimes within this tier, frankly, including the one we're going to talk about. But here's the tier, the bunch of blah. The Houston Rockets, the Orlando Magic, the Utah Jazz, the Brooklyn Nets, the Toronto Raptors, the Atlanta Hawks, and the Chicago Bulls. Don't want to talk about the Nets, but I do just want to point out one thing about them that when I was doing research for the show, Wes, I was just astounded by. Last 2 weeks, according to Clean of the Glass. This is just absolutely horrendous, disgusting stuff here. They're 1-4. They have a point differential of minus 24.1. That is almost 5 points worse per 100 possessions than the 29th team over that stretch. That is Portland. Their offense, Wes, they're scoring 90.8 points per 100 possessions. That is nearly 23 points. It's 29 and 0.4 points, or 29 and a half, somewhere around there, below the league average over the last 2 weeks in offense. Whatever is going on in Brooklyn right now, they need to get Kyrie back and have him walk around the arena with some sage and like detox the place, because good fucking Lord, it's hard to be that bad. It's just hard to be that bad when they fired the coach that no one seemed to like, and they have a bunch of players that are like frankly pretty decent and probably just shouldn't be this bad. This is pretty bizarre, honestly.
The whole season's been bizarre. I think you named this whole section of teams after the Brooklyn Nets. They're the epitome of blah. They are the most blah team. Even if Mikal Bridges is sort of a nice player and Cam Johnson's kind of a nice player, even though the contract doesn't look great, Nick Claxton's kind of a nice player and he's up for a new contract over the summer. They don't have anybody that is exciting, number one. They don't really have anybody that's like the number one on a good team. They just have like a bunch of dudes. You have the whole Ben Simmons situation that, as dramatic as that used to be, it has lost so much steam. Like, it's one thing in the Philadelphia market when Ben Simmons is doing these things, or on a Brooklyn team with Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving that's getting the national attention. But like, even Ben Simmons and that whole deal, people are sort of tired with, and that's kind of been swept under the rug. So, and he's actually been playing lately. I don't know, man. Something's got to, like, you mentioned the Sage. Like, I know they can't do it, but just start over. Like, whatever is happening right now in Brooklyn is just like bad vibes, bad juju. There's nothing good about that team, and there's no wonder that they can't get any fans into that arena. Who would want to watch that team?
There's a reason Knicks fans have like invade it and take it over when there's the quote unquote Battle of New York. It's tough to be the second team in that city. All right. Other team in this tier that's just worth shouting out, the Orlando Magic. 4-1 over the last 2 weeks. 7th in net, 9th in offense, 10th in defense. Philip Rossman-Reich, who does a really good job covering Orlando for Locked On Magic and at Orlando Magic Daily, noted that as they've won 8 out of their last 11 on top of their 4-1 out of their last 5, they have an offensive rating of 114.6. It's a little more respectable for them, and they're actually shooting 40% from 3 over that stretch. It feels like a little bit less of noise of Paolo Banchero shooting well from 3, and Suggs and Anthony hitting from 3, and Gary Harris shooting nearly 50%, and all of that. And their offense is still, frankly, hard to watch a lot of the time. It just doesn't work a lot of the time. There's a reason when like Paolo hit his game winners, like they're kind of shots he pulls out of nowhere, out of his ass a little bit, just because there's no structure. But I will, like, this team, even if they lose in 5 games, I do kind of just think they're going to be annoying to play for some team in the first round. I don't think they're super dangerous as far as upset goes, but there's something about this team that I can't really look away from, even if there's a lot I want to look away from.
They've been an elite defense all year long. So when you talk about like teams that are just going to be annoying to play in the playoffs, they're there, you know, and between Banchero and Wagner and their centers, whether it's Wagner or Batadze or Carter, like there's just size there. They're physical. Like they're just you got Jalen Suggs chasing you all around the court. Like that's just not going to be a fun team to play. Defensively, they're elite. Offensively, they're in the toilet, and that's sort of their story. But yeah, I mean that's sort of the definition of a team that's annoying to play in the playoffs.
Yeah, it's gonna be. Who should, if they were gonna upset someone, who would it be? Like if they were gonna not like is it like getting the Knicks into like a sluggy series? Like is that the weird one? Just because like Suggs could chase Brunson around for 7 games and like they just do enough. Like I don't think there's a real path for them with any of these ones, but that might be the one that I would talk myself into at least like stylistically making some sense.
My first thought was like Milwaukee because you have Suggs to chase Damian Lillard around, and then you have a bunch of guys with size to create a wall between Giannis and the basket. You got guys who could stand up to Brook Lopez, but then I think about the fact that they're not going to be able to score any points in that series, and that Milwaukee's like number one weakness is the fact that their guards can't guard anybody. And Orlando's number one weakness is that their guards don't scare anybody. So that's probably not it, but that was sort of my first thought.
Yeah, weird stuff there. All right, let's go to the last tier. Maybe sometime in the future you can compete for an NBA championship. Memphis, San Antonio, Portland, Charlotte, Detroit, and the Wizards. Some teams, frankly, in here, I'm not sure if they're ever going to compete for a championship, but that's not my problem. Wes, the only team I want to talk about here is the Spurs, and that's because Victor Wembanyama just remains a fucking alien. He had a 5x5 game recently. If you're not watching him regularly, I think people are just missing out. The Spurs are not the most watchable team in the league by any stretch of the imagination. They're, in fact, often kind of hard to watch outside of Vic. But this guy is just doing things that just don't compute to my brain. It's flabbergasting how good he is amid a pretty bad, horrendous team that's near the bottom of the league in so many categories.
Yeah, he's a legitimate top 30 player in the NBA, and that's probably too low already. Over his last 15 games, 21.1 points on 47% shooting, 38% from three, 85% on free throws, 10.4 rebounds, 4.3 assists, 1.9 steals, and 3.6 blocks. He's already one of the top 5 guys, according to any sports book, in Defensive Player of the Year. That's a little noisy just because of the big name of Victor Wembanyama. I don't think he's quite there, but this might be the last year somebody that's not named Victor Wembanyama wins Defensive Player of the Year for a while, if the Spurs could just be even a play-in team next year. And, he's awesome. And so, yeah, Spurs fans don't care that they're losing games. Get another good draft pick, go trade for Trae Young over the summer or whatever it is that you're going to do, and give Victor Wembanyama some help and then start going for it.
I just want them to just be aggressive in whatever way in the summer. I don't want them to wait. The worst thing they could do is wait around for draft picks and stuff. I'm not saying spend yourself into a hole and do dumb things that aren't actually in the best interest of Wembanyama long term. But there's a chance to just elevate this next year and make them be. There's a real path just because of him to be respectable next year. Mm-hmm. I want to see that. That's the bare minimum.
Yeah, you've got Wemby. Devin Vassell's given him good things this year. And there's some other bench pieces that you can toy around with. But go make a move for a legit point guard who could play pick and roll with Wembanyama, pick and pop with Wembanyama, and all these things. And go for it. There's no reason why you shouldn't. You shouldn't have the big expectations of winning a championship. But, yeah, go do what the Rockets did, basically. Go get some guys and be a respectable team next year that people want to watch.
We're gonna end up looking at free agents for this summer. Klay Thompson's new home? Mm-hmm. No. Drew Holiday, maybe. I don't know what happens there, but it doesn't really seem like the one. Bring back DeMar DeRozan? This is just such a not the free agency class to maybe. That's kind of it. This might need to be weird trades.
Yeah,
Tyus Jones.
That's why people Tyus Jones doesn't do it. Go make a move, a real, go get a guy that could be part of not necessarily your future, because of how young Wemby is and what his trajectory is, but if you could go get a Fred VanVleet type, it's just somebody that raises the floor. I don't know that you need to be thinking about ceiling because you have all these draft picks and all these things, but somebody that raises your floor out of the bottom 4 or 5 teams in the West, that is worth spending money on. I would go after a guy I don't know, what's Bruce Brown's future?
Yeah, I like that.
Guys like that, Buddy Hield, does he make sense as a floor spacer? I would be going after guys like maybe Tyus Jones, but I just think you want somebody a little bit better than that, but it also depends on who's available. Yeah,
free agency market is, gotta tell you, it finds a way to be interesting, and Clay can make it interesting. Paul George hasn't signed an extension, can make it interesting. James Harden can make it interesting, I guess. We didn't even talk about Gordon Hayward and the Thunder, but I gotta just, now I'm looking at his name. Gotta tell you, Wes, one thing we didn't hit on that we just should have that I want to pinpoint. They recently, when Giddey didn't start a second half, that's going to happen in a playoff series, and it's going to be for Hayward, and I think the Thunder might be better for it. But that's neither here nor there. This free agency class is not good. D'Angelo Russell? Not a lot.
I would call New Orleans about C.J. McCollum and just see how they value him. That to me is a guy who makes sense in a leadership role for that team.
Yeah. Fun stuff for Thunder. Can't we talk, or the Spurs, can't we talk about them all the summer? Wembanyama, just unreal. 5x5 game at his age, much less doing it at all, is just like, what are we doing here? All right, we're going to end there. This has been the Just Basketball Show for February 29th, our last episode of the month. Thanks again to Wes Goldberg for filling in for Brendan Clean this week. Wes, did I scare you for wanting to come back in the future?
You did not. It was a joy.
Okay. All right, good. We'll be back next week. Brendan will be back from England. We'll find out if you listen to. The shows are not based on the Phoenix Suns jabs we made here. Until next time, enjoy the hoops. I've been Chris Manning. Check out Thrive Fantasy. We'll talk to you soon.